Well, there is a key issue my friend raises. We treat them as criminals instead of as war terrorists and war criminals, because this won't just put New Yorkers at risk. It will not. It will put our soldiers at risk.
Absolutely.
I mean, having tried so many criminal cases, I can tell you, the best thing they do is roll in. They've got photographers. They've got people with the rubber gloves. They take the latex gloves. They take the evidence. They take DNA evidence. They take fingerprints. They do all of this forensic analysis of the scene, as my friends both note, because they've used that evidence. Our soldiers cannot afford to bring out a forensic wagon in the middle of a battlefield to check for DNA, to check for fingerprints, to establish a chain of custody. And both of my friends know if you don't have the chain of custody on a piece of evidence, it's not coming in. It's one of the reasons you don't charge war criminals as criminals in a civilian court, because our soldiers should not be put in harm's way trying to gather that kind of forensic evidence.
Every father and every mother and every sister and every brother of a soldier of this nation needs to be scared, because this undercuts our troops. This damages their morale. This undercuts their ability to do their job. This is a betrayal of America's fighting women and America's fighting men. And we need to stand up, and we need to speak out, and we need to say it's wrong. It's not just unsafe for the people of New York. It's not just unsafe for the people of Illinois. It's not just unsafe for the people of Texas or Arizona. It is unsafe for every soldier we have engaged in combat. It is a betrayal of them in the name of political correctness.
Political correctness. And when has the Constitution of the United States been applied to enemies of war captured on the battlefield outside of the United States? I don't think that's ever been done.
Has it ever happened?
I'm not
sure if that has ever been done.
I would doubt it has ever happened.
And this administration, again, wants to take the vernacular war on terror. They want to just erase the last, 4, 8 years. No, it was never a war. These were just criminal cases that need to be prosecuted, and we need to treat them that way.
I think the gentleman brings up a great point of history, and I want to add to it. Do you know that in World War II, enemy combatants caught in the United States, and there were some, who came into the United States, came ashore, or came to our coast in submarines, then came ashore, could not, under international law, be held in American civilian prisons. The reason for that is they are not, as of that point in time, they're not criminals, and they have not been convicted, and therefore cannot be punished as prisoners in American jails or prisons are being punished. And so we had to create camps where you could hold prisoners of war. As it turned out, we didn't adjudicate most of them. We released them upon the end of combat. In this case, we are actually doing the opposite. We are not just saying that they're not enemy combatants engaged in acts of war and treating them separately, and treating them, as our colleague from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, points out, through military tribunals. We're mixing them into the American criminal justice system, a system designed to preserve and protect the rights of the American people. It's insane, and the consequences will mean that, by extension, we have to go into the battlefield with evidence testing and with defense counsels, and, as my colleague from Texas pointed out, the notion that we have to read them their rights. This is lunacy and a betrayal of our military.
And as the gentleman knows, if you'll yield, a criminal defense lawyer in a civilian court is going to use discovery at every opportunity to embarrass the United States of America and to blame America first for the acts of a terrorist, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And what concerns me the most is that they're going to make a mockery of our criminal justice system here in the United States and use it as a propaganda weapon in what I still refer to as this war on terror. This was one of the biggest mistakes this president has made. The decision to close Guantanamo Bay. I saw Khalid Sheikh Mohammed down in Guantanamo. It was one of the most chilling things I've ever seen as he prayed, bowed over his prayer rug to Mecca. We haven't broken his spirit. And this administration, again, just granted him his wish. He gets his lawyer now, and he gets to come to New York City, just like his nephew, Ramzi Youssef, did, who, by the way, did not get the death penalty. And as I close, as I move on, I sincerely hope that this was a huge mistake, but I sincerely hope that this man is given the ultimate punishment so he can not only here on earth but move on to the next world.
Well, and the gentleman makes a great point also that he is not remorseful at all. And in fact, here he has been in prison, and this is filed this year, that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed says, and this is from his pleading that he himself prepared, so our religion is a religion of fear and terror to the enemies of God, the Jews, the Christians, and pagans. With God willing, we are terrorists to the bone. So many thanks to God. And he went on to say, and he quotes the Arab poet that stated, "We will terrorize you as long as we live with swords, fire, and airplanes." It's unbelievable that you would bring a guy like this into the United States of America, put our soldiers at risk for the future, and forcing them to try to gather forensic evidence while people are shooting at them. They're going to have to be worried about fingerprints and DNA evidence, and gee, do they have witnesses, getting witnesses' names and addresses, locations, so they can come back and perhaps bring them to court in New York someday to testify. We just don't do this. We can't afford to do this when people are at war. Our president, this administration may not realize we're at war, but there are people at war with us, and we fail to respond at our own risk. This is scary stuff. And we have the Military Commission Act of 2006. We're working on language that will make it a requirement, so that it is not an option for the president. I mentioned Article 1, Section 8 that gives power to the Congress to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. As a constitutional law professor mentioned this weekend to me as I was visiting with him about this issue, he said, you know, the court system besides the Supreme Court is really the only court, the Supreme Court is the only court in the country that has a right to exist under the Constitution. Every other court, tribunal, commission only has their existence at the will of Congress. And Article 3 and Section 1 makes that clear. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Go on over, and it says, even the Supreme Court, it talks about all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, and those in which the state shall be party. The Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. In all the other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. We have an obligation in this Congress to rein in a president that is putting New York City, our soldiers, our military at risk, and we fail to do so at the risk of those we are elected to serve and protect from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I yield to my friend from Arizona.